Yay, we're live.
Yay,
Hello.
live.
Hi.
We're going to give about, like I said, 20 to 30 seconds, let people log in and find the page on YouTube or on Facebook. In the meantime, we'll just sit here awkwardly and stare at each other and listen to Melissa's birds in the background.
What event is this? What is streaming? I'm curious what we're looking at. Should we give an introduction?
Yes, we will. Just give
Okay.
me 1 second. Yeah.
Okay.
Huh? A person? Yeah, you guys are checking this out on Facebook, aren't you? Well, yeah.
But there's a delay, and there's a delay between here and Facebook. So
There is a delay.
There is closed captioning, so that's good.
Yes, there's closed captioning. Sometimes it does pretty wonky things. So, it could be pretty funny to watch the closed captioning. Okay, so we're gonna,
jeez, sorry.
We're gonna go ahead and start. So we are doing the live talkback, the final live talkback for the In Their Own Voice Women's Theater Festival, and we have the production team and one of the cast/writers for Beyond the Mask with us today.
Two.
Oh,
Laura's also a writer and an actor. Yeah.
Just in my head, it's like director, producer, actor. Don't mind me. I'm very tired, guys. Okay. Excuse me. We're gonna do the thing we do at every talkback, where we're just gonna go around really fast and say your name, what you did for the show, and how long you've been doing theater, because inevitably somebody will ask that question. So I'll go ahead and start. I'm Beulah Vega. I was the Heroines, Harpies, and Harlots producer, and I have been doing theater since I was 7 years old, and I'm not good enough at math to tell you how long that is. So, Melissa.
Did you say me?
Yeah.
I'm Melissa Bingham, and I am the producer of Beyond the Mask. And I actually, I've been producing for about 35 years, and I've been attending theater for a lot of years. I'm not even going to tell you, because I started when I was a little girl. So, Laura.
I'm Laura J. Davies. I was the director of this film and also one of the actors. I played the crone. And I, like Beulah, have been doing theater since I was 7 years old. And that's a very, very long time. I had a hiatus in the middle when I had kids and raised a family, but I've been back to the theater for about 12 years now. So it's fun. Liliana.
Hello, my name is Liliana Myers. I go by she, her pronouns. I was an actress and writer in the Beyond the Mask piece that you may have just seen. And I think I've been engaged in theater since middle school. So I'm 34, so I don't know what that puts me at, 28 years or 25 years or sometime. That is about a quarter of a decade.
So you're way better at math than I am. Way faster. Okay. Let's start with one of the questions we've been getting at all the talkbacks, which is, so this was a devised piece. Actually, before we get into the question, let me have you guys answer that. What is a devised piece of theater? And for any of you.
Anybody want to go? Go ahead, Laura.
A devised piece is something that a group of actors, writers, creatives get together and decide what they're going to do and collaborate to create the words and the magic. So it's usually a collaborative effort of something that hasn't ever been done before.
Okay. It's like making a recipe from scratch.
And in this specific case, each of the actors devised and wrote their own monologue and their own script. And then we all gave input and content and helped edit and things on that. But each of them really developed their own words and their own voice.
Cool. Okay, so was it very different for you guys working on a devised piece versus working on a more traditional scripted piece?
Yeah, I would say yes. Just because of the process of, we started this, Caitlin and Lillian started over the summer, right? I believe August, September-ish. And I came into the project in October to really kind of help hold the space for them and help them to figure out what the story was. And, for me, it's like having kind of what that vision of what an end product looked like, because we knew this festival was what we were creating for. And through trying to determine, what was happening in the world at that time, the pandemic was ablaze, as Lillian says in her monologue, and all these things, trying to have a vision, to know you have an end product that you want to produce and not really know what your story is. It meandered for, a good 4 months. And then with Caitlin and Lillian and I, and then we brought in Laura and Juliet, who is not with us today, and then it kind of fleshed out. Well, we had the seed of the idea of this writer needing inspiration and finding to meet these muses and these faces of the feminine. And so that's how we got everybody to kind of come in and roll into the characters.
I'll take a stab. So my acting conservatory training was in devised collaborative work. Mm-hmm. And it was from Naropa University, which is a Buddhist-inspired contemplative education in Colorado. And their focus was, sounds like extremely magical there. And that focus was really about working with what arises, mm-hmm. and also allowing each person to come in and have a voice. And I think that's very appropriate for this festival in her own voice. And so since I moved to Sonoma County 4 years ago, the opportunity to create devised work with adults hasn't arisen, but I have done it with young students. And so this was such a delight to have an opportunity to create with such disciplined, dedicated women. And I appreciate, Beulah, for you holding the space and holding us accountable to producing a product. Was a really lovely challenge and also very healing for me as it was a piece of personal work.
Thank you.
I have done devised work before, but it has, the one that I believe Beulah worked with me on, the Tennessee Menagerie. No, you didn't do that.
No, that was before me. I saw that.
Yeah, that was a devised piece of created through somebody else's words, mm-hmm. not our own words. So this was a really unique experience. And though for most of the other people in the festival, their words were resonating with their experience, mm-hmm. For me, and I think a bit of that is true with the other actors in our group, a lot of the words are reflective of some of our own experience, mm-hmm. but certainly not autobiographical, as it were. I mean, right. I'm married, I have kids, I had a wonderful mother who's, I had a great relationship with. So none of those things that my character brought out were really reflective of my experience. Mm-hmm. Though I was in a show that got canceled right before we went into lockdown, which was the last piece of theater I almost did. So I think there were parts of our own words that we brought forth in these characters. And as a group, I think we were able to collaborate to really fulfill that archetype that Hecate mm-hmm. Is there for, that we're all parts of the same because we're all the feminine.
Mm-hmm. You actually kind of touched upon one of the other questions, which is, as you say, most of the other pieces in this festival, with the exception of the Graces, who are kind of half and half, were very autobiographical. They were very much people speaking to things that had happened to them and making it theatrical to a certain extent. So how much would you guys say of Beyond the Mask was from personal events, and how much of it do you think was, drawing from other sources?
Well, I can't really speak for Caitlin and Juliet, who are not here. Mm-hmm. I think that certainly each of us had elements of truth in what we put forth that we could draw on, both as actors, and they were personal moments for us. I don't know that we could put a percentage on how much is, collaborative, devised, and how much is based on our own individual truths. And I don't know if that's really an important distinction to have, because as women, we all have kind of a collective truth, even when we're young and when we're very old. So I think I know it's been my experience from people who have seen this, that different parts of different things resonated for them really deeply. So I don't know, Lillian?
I would add on to that. I had a friend that saw it, I think last weekend, and his comment to me immediately was, "Oh my gosh, it's so much your story, and it's so it's your words." And I'm like, I didn't write any of this. I collaborate, I edited, but it really wasn't. He's like, but you said some of those exact same things at the beginning of the pandemic, or, these different things. So I think the themes are so universal, that as we look at, I agree with Laura, I don't know what the percentage would be. There are elements of each person's truth within each monologue. I know, and Caitlin's lines that stands out to me is, we lost our beloved business, which they did during the pandemic. Lillian's got lines that were true to her. Juliet's got lines that were exactly what somebody said to her, kind of things. So there are definitely elements, but I think to weave the story and to weave the archetypes in that we really wanted, we tried to also just pull kind of from that universal truth as well.
Lillian, did you want to answer, or are you good?
I think it's been shared and said.
Okay.
Thumbs up.
Let's see. I don't see any comments or questions from the viewers yet. So let's move on to one of the questions we got for one of the other shows that was a semi-devised piece, was how many iterations did you guys go through for this show? Like, was there, I actually do know the answer to this question. I didn't with the other piece. I had no idea they'd gone through as many iterations as they had. But it's a good question. Like, how do you go from that idea, and how many?
A lot. I'll just from my perspective, from going from having no idea to having this finished 40-minute film, the steps in between are multitudinous. Is that a word? But each writer then took their own, turns editing what they did. And, some of them came together really tightly, really quickly. And then some of them had other iterations. And then Laura and I were editing along the way. So it took us probably 6 meetings, Lillian, to even 6 or 7 meetings to get rehearsals, to get to like the seed idea. And then coming up with some of the little kernels, and then bringing in Laura and Juliet to really then start to flesh out that story. Once we all started working together in January, right? Yeah, like mid to late January. And we were able to get it up and be filming by the middle of April, right? Yeah, it's all a blur. I mean, Laura and I were talking earlier. We've been away from it now for a couple of weeks, so it's like, oh yeah, some of the stress is gone.
The other thing that has to really be said is that initially we were creating this as a theatrical devised play, but it turned into a film, and that totally transformed and pivoted what we would do and how we would do it. And there's 2 little sections of the final film script that differed from what we had as the stage play, because we realized, we have to have this happen sooner to be able to have the exposition of what's going on beyond that. And that whole experience is just so, number one, foreign. I've never directed a film before. Melissa's never produced a film before. and to be able to do that without a stage manager, a production assistant. I mean, this was a real bare bones thing. Melissa, me, Caitlin, Lillian, Juliet, one sound person, and 2 camera people. And that's
one amazing editor,
and one phenomenal
amazing editor. Yes, Marjorie Lewitt.
So and it all kind of came together, but it certainly I've reflected and flashed on it numerous times of how different this would be, how differently I would have directed it for the stage instead of for a film.
Lillian, do you have anything you want to add?
Sure. I mean, my grandfather's voice comes into my head when answering the questions, how many iterations did it go through? And my grandpa, back in World War II, when he went to Stanford to study writing, and then he got drafted and he came back, and he told me, he didn't have a career as a writer, but he loved Shakespeare, and he's still alive. He's 97. And, he always tells me, in order to write a piece of writing, it needs to be drafted at least 7 times. So I tortured Melissa and Laura by drafting my monologue 7 or 8 times, at least.
I think it was 9.
It was 9.
Yeah, it was more than 7. I'm pretty confident.
And they were like, ah! But it takes that long to get a good piece of writing. It really does. And in my opinion, or in his opinion, that's pretty old school, but it does take a really long time, and everyone's voices shapes where we're headed. If Melissa directed, it would be a very different piece. If Caitlin directed, it would be a different piece. And if I was working on someone else's writing, it would be a very different product. And so it's just definitely a commitment to the process versus the product.
And I think,
will say all of the drafts did pay off in the end, because the performance was great and the words were powerful.
And I think for all of us, and I will speak for the other actors because I think it is really true, this was really challenging for us as actors because these were our words. Even if it wasn't necessarily our experience, these were words that we wrote and we were acting, and it's so very different to remove yourself from the script when you have such an attachment to what you've written. So I think that was, for me, a really interesting and enlivening part of the experience, was to have to work with that script that I created, or that Lillian created, or that Juliet created, and realize how strong and powerful those words were, and to have to follow that script, because a script usually is there and it's laid out, and if it has legs, which I think all of these parts of the scripts did, it speaks to you. It's all pretty much there. You just kind of have to rise up to the road to meet it. So it was a very different experience that way.
And I just want to commend all of the actors and the writers, because this is a very vulnerable thing, as we saw with this entire festival. Whether the experience was 100% true or not to each of our actors in Beyond the Mask, it's still, as Laura said, it's their words. But what I want to just, the open-heartedness that I saw come out of these 4 women, and their willingness to be vulnerable and speak these words with such heart and such emotion, was really one of the most rewarding parts of this whole process for me, was and being able to kind of hold that space for them to have this experience in this time that has been so restrictive and just kind of otherworldly, to be able to do something to get kind of back in the bones and back in the body of being an actor. So
if people are out, I know people are out there because I can see that you're watching, so feel free to type in any questions you get. Okay.
I'll say one more thing, which was such an unusual rehearsal process for us, because it was COVID. And here we were during COVID rehearsing over Zoom. We had one in-person rehearsal before we actually filmed. And that would not necessarily have been our choice, but it was a reality of, performance in the time of COVID. So that was a very different experience, I think, for everybody. And the other thing that was, for me personally, really interesting is I've had people who said, break a leg, or how did it go? And it's very different. This isn't like we're streaming this every single performance. It's already done, it's filmed, and it's streaming itself. So yeah. I've actually been reflecting on that a lot. Melissa and I were talking about that earlier, how different it is to have the performance experience that's not live theater. Even if it's live film, which this wasn't for anybody. No. So
that's very true. It's weird because this was our final showing of this, but for almost everybody involved in this, except for me, and because I'm crazy, everybody was actually finished with this project a good 2 weeks ago, you know. So it is weird to now come to the final show and be like, oh, wait, we thought the final show already happened.
Well, and there's also that piece of, you know, and Laura and I were talking about this earlier too, is when you're directing live theater, producing live theater, you know, you get it up on its legs and then the actors take it and run with it. And the stage manager does it. And so for Laura and I to have gone back now and watched the same film over and over and over and over, we've gotten really nitpicky. We have a long list of all the things that we would like to tweak and you know, we're super proud of what is out there right. And so whereas a director would just walk away and let the actors run with it, we kind of were like, what do we do with that? There's that piece of like, oh, how do we live with that? So sorry for the chimes.
That's okay. The chimes are nice. Ironically, that is why I don't watch my own shows after they've opened. People always get annoyed with me about that. You're not watching? I'm like, no, you don't want me to.
There was no opportunity to give notes after the show was open. So
right. Yeah. So, still no questions, guys.
How many people are out there in TV land?
5 for sure. Well, no, I know of 5 streams. That's another difficult thing about this show, is because I can say we sold X amount of tickets, but X amount of tickets could mean 1 person watching it, or it could mean 10 people watching it. And we have no way of knowing. So there are 5 streams via Facebook, and I can't tell on YouTube, honestly. I don't think I have that option. Maybe I do.
Hello, people out there.
So here's a question, though. Why the cemetery? How did you guys end up in the cemetery?
Lillian,
you want to take it, or you want me to take it?
Caitlin and I and Melissa all were just really enjoying laughing with each other when we met, and we loved, and the humor was dark. And we wanted to make a piece of film where we could social distance at the time. It was very important. The vaccine was a distant idea. So that felt safe, and it felt dark, and it felt edgy, you know what I'm saying?
And at one point we did talk about the writer going to different benches. Part of it started with the bench, and really, you know, and it maybe a bench at a bus stop, and a bench at a park, and then a bench in a cemetery, because we were thinking at kind of the evolution of you know, a child, a maiden, and then maybe a mother who's going to work, and then a crone who was in a cemetery. And then it all just then we got on that cemetery idea, and it was like, well, all of those people, all of those iterations could still be seen in a cemetery. And, you know, Santa Rosa Rural Cemetery gave us such a beautiful backdrop to film this piece. And we looked at, I did the great Sonoma County cemetery tour and looked at a lot of rural cemeteries, and I drove literally all over the county looking at cemeteries, and rural was still the best option for everybody. And they were super great to work with. And so, and it gave us, I think it's a part of the story. I mean, the cemetery really is another character in the story, because of the, you know, the choices that Laura made in terms of direction. Laura was very deliberate in the shots that we got of, you know, we were very respectful not to have the names on the tombstones, but to have those beautiful rose images. And, you know, there's one where there's the wheat and the hands and all the different things. Laura walked that cemetery, I don't know, 4 times, looking at different things, you know, and pointing out to our camera people, you know, get this shot, get that shot. So.
And we were very fortunate the last day that we were refilming, because we had to refilm one of the monologues, that the sun came out in the morning, and I was just like, oh my God, we've got to get that shot. We were really hoping that we would have had lots of fog when we were doing the monologues. It would have been great. We didn't. We did have a couple of wackadoodle homeless people that came through that we kind of had to stop. That was fun.
Or edit out.
There, one
Which
shot.
we did.
We panned and went, oh my God, look, there's someone in the background there. Oh, cut that
at the very end of the editing process.
But we were really fortunate because we filmed very, very early in the morning, like 6 a.m. To try and avoid the traffic noise and people walking their dogs and things like that. And that kind of lent itself to a little bit of that sense. And after all, Caitlin's story was that she was a horror writer, which she is. So, and you know that.
By the way, horror writers are literary writers. I think I actually gave you guys that note.
You gave us a note, and we changed the script specifically because of your note. So, and I would almost ask you, Beulah, because you came and saw a very rough early rehearsal. How much did you think the story transformed from that first rehearsal?
You know, I don't know that the story transformed. The rehearsal I saw definitely had that through line, had the, okay, this is where they're going with this and this and this. It definitely tightened. It definitely became, how do I put this? As a director, I'm often reading scripts where I'm reading the script and I'm like, this is a great story, but it's going to need a lot of tweaking to make it a piece, a finished piece. And that's kind of how I felt with that, is that it was an almost finished rough draft of a script that then needed to go through production. So I think it definitely got a lot tighter.
We did substantial changes at the end.
Yeah, you guys did substantial changes. Yeah. But the storyline, the fact that you guys were telling this story of this woman facing these fears within these archetypes, that was strong even then. So I was really glad to see that you guys were able to pull that and make that such a central and strong theme for it.
Thanks.
And I have to say, and I want to commend the actors, but I also just really want to point out Laura. Once Laura got into the story and came on as our director, because she didn't initially step into this project as the director, she stepped in as an actor and a writer. And when she finally, you know, we convinced her to be the director, or she couldn't take it anymore and said, I'll direct, whichever one of those it was, I'm very grateful because what she literally had, I mean, I had a pretty good picture in my head of what it could look like, but I had the big vision. Laura got so granular and was able to really pull the story together visually beyond the words. And we have to pay homage to Pond 5, which is where we all found the stock. That's all stock music that we used in the piece. And so Pond 5, Laura spent hours listening to Pond 5. We all gave input, and then Laura but she had specific visions for what piece of music went where and how it all played together. And so just like that sunshine shot at the end, or, you know, where that's coming through the trees, you know, Laura's really held that detailed vision for what this piece looked like. So.
Yay. So we're just about out of time. So I will ask, is there anything else you guys want to say? Questions, comments, statements for the good of the cause?
Thank you, Beulah, for putting it together.
I just say thank you. Yeah. Thanks for having us.
Again, all the other actresses in this piece. it was, and on the pieces of this whole festival, it was really nice to see all of your work. And I wish we could, in person, but
that would have been nice. So, okay. Thanks, guys. Well, thanks for coming.
Thank you.
And
Thanks, Beulah.
thanks for doing
Thank
this.
you.
A great fun 5 to you all.
1 to 5.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.